All right. This is a Republican leader in Congress, forget her name, but it's a sad day when you have to sue the Democrats and the leaders in the Democratic Party in Congress to get them to obey the Constitution and work together. Here goes.
Work together. After the Speaker of the House delayed for weeks and weeks, refused to even address the issue. She then commissioned a report. The report came up with some interesting suggestions. There were some good suggestions in the report. The report also noted that proxy voting was likely unconstitutional. The Democrats' own report.
Proxy voting, likely unconstitutional. That's true. So there were some good things. But again, they're not working with Republicans. And this is wrong.
So instead of going down the path of saying, how can we do this together, the Democrats have adopted a completely partisan scheme, and they have done it in a way that absolutely infringes on the rights of the minority and infringes on the Constitution. And so we today, it's a sad day that we have got to be to the position where we're bringing suit against the Speaker. We're bringing suit against the Democrats.
Suit against the Speaker, suit against the Democrats. Interesting.
In order to prevent them from pushing this proxy vote through. And I think it's also really important to mention that one of the first items on which they are planning to use this proxy vote is an item that deals directly with the national security of this nation. Now, I'm hopeful the leader and the whip have asked that they pull that FISA vote. FISA is a crucially important set of authorities, and it's a set of authorities that was abused. We have to make sure that we deal with the abuse and that we address the abuse, but we should not push through a bill which, in my view, would fundamentally weaken our ability to keep the nation safe because of the amendments that have been added to that bill. And we shouldn't do that with proxy vote. Imagine that. You've got millions of Americans across this country who will not be represented because their members have decided to use a proxy. And we're going to pass a bill that's going to fundamentally harm the security of the nation if the Democrats continue down that path. Now, if that's not an abuse of their constitutional authority and power, I can't imagine what is. So I urge the Democrats to pull that bill, and I also urge them to rescind this rule that allows proxy voting. There are ways that we can work together. As I said, many of us have been public about wanting to do that. This is not a time for partisanship. It's not a time to try to take partisan advantage of a crisis. And so with that, I'd like to turn things over to my colleague, Mr. Roy.
Well, thanks, Liz. I want to thank the leader and thank the whip for their efforts in bringing us together here to stand up for the Constitution. As a former federal prosecutor, a former first assistant attorney general of Texas, I've worked on a lot of these kinds of cases in my past. And it's important to me that we stand up for the Constitution, but it's also personal. My dad is a survivor of polio. He contracted the virus in 1949 and still deals with those effects today. I'm a cancer survivor. We had at least one plaintiff on our side who is battling cancer right now. And who didn't get to vote on this proxy measure, but believes that it's important for us to stand up and defend the Constitution. And I think that's what's really at stake right here. And so if you think about the founding fathers and what occurred, the leader referenced what happened with respect to Philadelphia and yellow fever. There were 5,000 deaths out of 50,000 people living in Philadelphia in 1793. 10% of the population, that would be the equivalent today of 170,000 or so people losing their lives. And that's where the Congress is supposed to meet. If you go look at a letter from October 24th of 1793 that James Madison wrote to President Washington, he outlines the concerns about how Congress should meet, where we should meet, walks through the consternation of following the Constitution to ensure that Congress does its job. And I would encourage you to look at that letter. The founders struggled with these issues. That's why it is important for us to stand up today. We cannot delegate away that which our constituents have delegated to us under the Constitution. We cannot hand that to another member, much less hand it to 10 other members. That's an extraordinary change in our constitutional system of government. And I would just point out, a year ago this last Sunday, I walked onto the floor of the House and I objected to $19.5 billion passing by unanimous consent. Why? You guys wrote stories that it was about trying to object to the funding. But the truth is, it was about process. It was about making sure our rights are protected so that we can have a vote, a roll call vote. Fast forward to March of this last year. What happened? We had a member of this body who demanded that we have a quorum and then demanded that we actually have a roll call vote. The Constitution provides that you have to have a fifth of the body agree, and the body didn't have a fifth that agreed, so we didn't have a roll call vote. That's the Constitution in action and working. That's what we're up here trying to defend and protect, to make sure that we protect our ability to represent our constituents without undermining the structure of government. I want to thank Chuck Cooper, my longtime friend, for being willing to take on this case and to do so with the excellence that he's known for. He's one of the most brilliant legal minds in the country, and I look forward to this moving forward through the system. I'll pass it off to Mr. Johnson.
Hey, thank you all for being here. Listen, for 20 years before I got to Congress, I litigated constitutional law cases in federal courts around the country. I had some difficult cases on occasion. This is a really easy one. I brought along a little visual aid here for our Democrat colleagues. I want them to take a look at the manual that each of us get each Congress. It even has our name on the front here. And it has all the rules and all the procedural goings on of the House incorporated here and published, but it is preceded by the United States Constitution. I know many of them don't carry one around in their lapel pocket like we do, but they do have a book. And I would just refer them to the actual language of the Constitution. It's been said this lawsuit and this effort is about politics. This is about the Constitution itself. Let me read you 3 excerpts. You just have to look at Article 1. The first article of the Constitution, and look at Section 4. It says, the Congress shall assemble at least once in every year, and such meeting shall be on the first Monday in December. Now, we know that one, that provision was superseded by the 20th Amendment in 1933, but they echoed and adopted that same language. You flip over to Article 1, Section 5. It says, a majority of each house shall constitute a quorum to do business, and a smaller number may adjourn from day to day, and may be authorized to compel the attendance of absent members in such manner and under such penalties as each house may provide. Flip over to the next section, Article 1, Section 6. It says the senators and representatives of each house shall be privileged from arrest during their attendance at the session of their respective houses. Now, this is the 1780s, of course, when the Constitution was drafted and ratified. But 100 years later, the Supreme Court looked at that very specific question. We cite this in our lawsuit. It's U.S. v. Ballin, 1892. The Supreme Court said the Constitution requires, quote, the presence of a majority. And when that majority is present, the power of the House arrives. Look, this is really simple for folks back home. We have the greatest, most powerful, most free nation in the history of the world. We celebrate that on Memorial Day, as we all did this last weekend. Those who have given their lives to preserve that, to preserve this Constitution. But at only 243 years into this, we have to remember we're still a very young country. We're still a grand experiment in the ideas of liberty and self-governance. Our Constitution that is based upon the idea that we have a government of, by, and for the people is based on very particular foundations and presuppositions. And one of those is really important, that the members who are elected, the representatives who are elected to represent all the people throughout the country.
Representatives who are elected to represent the people. The Democrats and the Republicans aren't representing the people's will and desires very well. Both parties. May be blunt about that. Democrats may be worse, but Republicans need some effort in that area too.
Will come together physically and arm wrestle over public policy. You'll have very different ideas, very different principles, philosophies represented. That's kind of the point. But the idea is that we would all get together and work together to find consensus, to move the ball forward for the most people. That's the premise of our Constitution. That's the premise of our republic. You can't have a republic operate any other way. We don't have a king who's a sovereign. The people are the sovereign, of, by, and for the people. And that's what meeting together and assembling and having a physical presence is all about. You can't do that by video, and you certainly can't do it by proxy. So that's what this is about. I'll tell you, I represent myself in this lawsuit. All of us are signed on as plaintiffs, and we also have constituents. And I talked to my constituent who signed on as a plaintiff last night, Lorene Spratt. She is deeply upset about this. She's a patriot. She votes in every election, and she is afraid that our votes are being watered down and that the Constitution is being violated, and she has a right to be heard. I think this goes to the Supreme Court pretty quickly, and I think the answer is pretty simple. It's right here in the book that we refer our colleagues to.
We're going to leave that at that. I think they're absolutely right. I don't believe in this proxy voting. I think you need to be present as much as possible. There may be exceptions to that in the future, but let's make an exceptions, not rules. It's Roger Martin from Billings, Montana. You heard this from the Republican House. House GOP officially sued Speaker Nancy Pelosi, starting that lawsuit, and this is going to go to the Supreme Court rather quickly. Good day. They're pulling politics again, and they're destroying the Constitution as they do it. This is wrong. It needs to be stopped, and I think it will be fairly shortly. Good day.